Welcome to the Focus Series podcast channel by AUA Media Lab. I'm Shawn McIntosh, the program chair in the MA in Journalism program, and I've got a special guest today, Richard Quest. He is the international business correspondent at CNN, the anchor at Quest Means Business, and also is the host of the travel series Quest's World of Wonder, as well as the aviation and airline correspondent for CNN. So my first question, when do you sleep?
That's a really good question. I've been rather blessed, actually. Funny you mention that. I've been rather blessed in I don't really need that much sleep. I tend to sort of go for about 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night. It's quite nice if you get a bit more. I'm very, very good at husbanding energy. Quite often, if you see me on a story or you see me doing something, you might just see me sitting in the corner and you'll think, oh, he's a bit boring. But actually what I'm doing is husbanding the energy for when it is needed. And it's the old rule, eat, sleep and pee when you can, not when you want to, because you never know when you'll get to do it again. And a lifetime of doing this sort of job just basically tells you when to do it.
Right, right. So you graduated from University of Leeds with a law degree and then was at Vanderbilt for a year after that, and you were at the student station WRVU.
WRVU, a division of Vanderbilt Student Communications Incorporated.
There we go.
Some things just never leave you.
Was that your first exposure to journalism?
No. So my first radio was what we have in Britain, these hospital radios. Now, these are little radio stations that used to broadcast on closed circuit to the patients, and they would play patient requests. Now, whether the patients enjoyed them or not, who knows? This was tended to be more for those who were volunteering it. But this was in the 1970s and early 80s. This was the way you got into radio. You'd cut your teeth. So I started at the St. James's Hospital Broadcasting Unit at the age of, I think it was been 13. Now, what does that mean? That means if you bear in mind, I'm 62. For the best part of 50 years, at some point, I have been involved in broadcasting. And if you follow Malcolm Gladwell's, 10,000 hours, the outliers theory, you get pretty good at it after a while, just because you've been doing it so long. And where I find that really, particularly today, somebody will tell me that edit's not going to work, or that sound edit is not going to work. Right. And I'll just say, yes, it will. And they say, no, it's not going to work. I said, it will. And how do I know? Because when I started, we cut tape with a razor blade. You literally cut the tape. You made your marks, you cut the tape, you joined it together, you put a bit of sticky tape on it, and that was how you edited tape. And so you learned the art in those days of how to do it.
Right.
And thank God you don't have to do it that way anymore. You can do it digitally. But in some shape or form, from the hospital broadcasting unit, the HBU, through to BBC local radio, WRVU Nashville, and then on to the BBC.
Right. Okay. So what kinds of, how do you feel like your law degree has helped you in terms of the journalism?
Now, this is when it gets controversial. You're
speaking to a microbiology undergraduate major, by the way, so.
Because I do believe that the law degree is one of the best degrees, period.
Why?
Even if you've no intention of studying the law. And by the way, I was happy to study law. I loved the law, particularly criminal law. I used to really enjoy it. But I wanted to try to be a journalist, a top quality journalist. My late father, when I told him I wanted to be a journalist, he said, he was a doctor and a lawyer. He said, the problem is, Richard, you will have the best dinner party stories and the smallest car parked outside if you don't do law. But I think that what the law does teach you, it teaches you forensic thought. I think it teaches you forensic thought, that there is two sides to every argument and every point needs to be said. Unless you're talking about genocide, by and large, there are two sides to every argument, and both sides are entitled to be heard.
Right.
And not only that, I do get a bit weary sometimes with journalists today who start from an assumption that they're all crooks and villains. And not only that, they're all corrupt and out for what they can get.
Right.
And that might be true in certain circumstances, but they're not prepared to hear both sides.
Right. Right.
And I think that law teaches you that the facts come first. Right. And not only that, you have a principle in English law, the barrister principle, which is you take the case that you're given.
Right.
And so I do think law does teach that in a very clear way. This is when I can feel some of your colleagues starting to bristle. Some of the disciplines might be a bit more woolly on the rigor required to get to grips with the facts.
Right. Right. So what advice would you give, like, for example, journalism students or students who think they want to get into journalism in terms of majoring?
Why? No, seriously, why? What is it you want to do?
Yeah.
If you merely want to give me your opinion on what's happening in the world, that's not journalism.
That's what blogs are for. So.
That's not journalism.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember interviewing an intern once who just really wanted to tell me about her views on the Middle East. And I said, well, where's the journalism here?
Right.
I was taught, like Rumpole of the Bailey, the famous English books by John Mortimer, you leave your opinions with your hat and your coat at the door.
Right. Right.
And that is really true today, where you have multi-ethnic, diverse newsrooms working on stories where people involved are on opposite sides or might be on opposite sides or take different views. Mm-hmm. And so I say the first thing is, why do you want to be a journalist?
Right.
And then you get all sorts of crappy answers. Oh, I want to tell the truth. Oh, I want to do this. Oh, crusading. No.
Right.
Why do I want to be a journalist? Because I want to tell you what happened.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I prefer to do morning journalism than evening journalism. Why? Because evening journalism, you're like a dog that's worrying a bone that's been around all day, just playing with the same bone. But with morning journalism or morning shows, you get a chance to say, good morning, it's 7 o'clock. And since you went to bed, this has happened.
Right. Right.
Let me tell you what's happened while you were asleep. And there's an incredible excitement in waking people up with news.
Right. Right.
Which I adore. And I still get that thrill of doing it.
Yeah.
So ask yourself why you want to do it. And then what sort of journalism you want to do. Investigative. I admire people who love investigative journalism. It bores me rigid. I love the product.
Right.
But I haven't got the...
Why does it bore you? Because
Oh, no. Just because I haven't got the stamina. I'm not that sort of person that wants to spend 6 months researching a particular program.
Okay.
I like the clean sheet of the day.
Okay. But your book on the MH370 flight, I mean, that was essentially a long form. How did you clearly dove into that, right?
And I'll never do it again, I'll tell you that.
That explains why there's no other books after that.
No. Shall I tell you how that came about?
How? Yeah.
Because I had been covering the story wall to wall. It was a new policy of CNN, the go all in policy. Right. And I suddenly realized for the first and only time in my career, I'd kept all the press releases. I'd kept the press releases from the Malaysians, from from Boeing, from this. And I looked and I kept notes.
Right.
And I suddenly thought, oh, hang on, I've got it all. I've got the makings of a book. All I now need to do, he says, is do the rest of the research. And that nearly killed me. I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and work and do it. So I like the clean slate of the day. Right. And maybe we can, at some point, I can talk about my 10 golden rules of broadcast journalism. But one of them is the day will always provide. People will spend hours worrying about what we're going to put in the program and planning and have this story and that story. My view is the day will always provide.
Okay, right. So what changes, in your long career in journalism, how do you feel about the status of journalism today, where it's going? Are you feeling good about it, or are there areas that you're especially worried about in terms of how journalism has been being done and will be done?
You have to recall, I came into journalism just after Watergate.
Right.
When the crusading investigative journalist, you're all crooks, the truth will out, a deep throat. Right. That was the prevalent view. So anybody who came into journalism was riding the horse with the sword and the shield. Right. What have I noticed? I've noticed more and more people want to give their opinion. And what I say, certainly even to quite senior reporters, I say, I don't care about your opinion. What I care about is your assessment. What's the difference? Your opinion is what you think. Your assessment is a judgment based on experience and coverage.
And evidence, and yeah.
So when I say to John King, our guru on US politics, John, what do you think is happening here? And he says, well, I think what's happening is X, Y, Z. He's not giving an opinion of if you're just giving an opinion, you're no more than the man on the Clapham omnibus or sitting in a bar drowning your sorrows.
Right.
But John King has covered this for X number of years. So when he says, I think what's happening is X, he's giving me an assessment of the situation. And the same is true across all my colleagues. Sanjay Gupta on COVID, he's giving me an assessment as a neurosurgeon, as somebody who's covered these things. When somebody says to me, Richard, what do you think on interest rates? It's not, I think this, that, and the other. No, I'm giving you an assessment of 40 years of covering the economic cycle.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that's the big thing that I think young journalists have to learn, that it takes time to build up that body of work that entitles you to give an assessment, not an opinion.
Right, right.
Opinions are left for the opinion pages.
Right.
And if you're lucky enough, you will be fortunate to become a journalist who can write opinion pieces, and then you can give more of yourself.
Right, right. Don't you think it's a little bit ironic that some of the best reporters get rewarded to then start writing columns, so they stop doing much of the reporting and doing the opinion
what they're doing,
pieces,
of course,
right?
is giving glorified assessments.
Yes, right.
So on the front page in the news, it's an assessment of the facts. On the back page, it's an assessment of the facts, and here's what I think really should be happening.
Right.
Related to this, what I think is the biggest danger is the degradation of quality journalism. What do I mean by this? Fake news. Now, I do not care whether you get your news from CNN, the BBC, Al Jazeera, CNBC, we can go down the list, the New York Times. Any one of us will tell you what has happened in an honest and true fashion. Some might have more of a Middle Eastern slant, some will have more of an Amerislant, some will have more of a UK slant, but we'll all tell you what's happened. The bomb went off at 8 o'clock. 6 people have been killed. The police say X did it, and they're looking for 15 people.
Right. Right.
The moment you start to call us fake news, you are playing Jenga with the truth.
Yep.
And worse, much, much worse. You're now encouraging people to get their news from Facebook groups.
Right. Exactly.
So if I said to them, would you like to ride in a car would you like to ride in a vehicle where the brakes have been repaired by somebody whose own experience was to watch some weird YouTube videos from a non-known provenance? You'd say, not bloody likely. But they will watch. Oh, my friend said she saw it on Facebook. Well, it must be true because I saw an Insta feed. Right. And these same people say to my face, I don't believe CNN.
Right.
And I say, right, would you like to tell me how many people that Insta feed blogger has got in the region?
Right.
They can't.
Right.
They just are now predisposed to believe that what we are saying is wrong.
Right. How do you think it got to that situation? Given all the fact checking, all the work that journalists do to report, to be truthful, report the truth, and then people just are kind of, throwing it away, ignoring it. How do you do that? And then how does media restore trust among
citizen
audience?
Journalism comes along.
Okay.
The World Wide Web, magnificent. Citizen journalism comes along, and now everybody's a publisher. And now you've got conspiracy theorists joining the crowd. Right. And now everybody can read the conspiracy theorists and the World Wide Web and all the stuff. And it's a Jenga.
Right. Yep.
And then and then you have a former president of the United States saying it's fake news.
Right.
This was new. Don't underestimate this.
No.
We'd had politicians saying that it wasn't the full story. We'd had politicians saying this, but we'd never had anybody putting a name fake news.
Right.
And if you tell people often enough, if you say to people often enough that the shit doesn't stink, eventually they'll believe you.
Right. Right.
There is no magic in that. We know it from history.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
Right. How do you think media can counter that?
Media can't. You're missing the point. You're missing the point. Media can't. Education has to.
Okay.
Education and parents, home life, it has to be trimmed in. We've now got to jump back.
Right.
We've now got to go back further. But unfortunately, there's now an entire generation of parents that don't believe it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, what in God's name do you not believe in the New York Times?
Right.
Maybe it is conservative small c, in terms of traditional.
Right. Right.
Maybe it is going to take an orthodox view. Maybe CNN is going to look establishment.
Right.
But would you rather? So I find it bewildering.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's much more a question of media literacy, and like you say, going back, educating better.
But let's talk about. Hang on a second. You've started me off here. Let's talk about your journalism, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
What are you going to teach?
Yeah. So the master's program. Well, I'm teaching 2 intro journalism courses right now.
What though?
So, how to do interviews, how to listen to interviews, how to critically analyze information, how to find the information you need. Story angle. What's a story? Answering the so what question. Right. So again, thinking about audiences. Why should they care about this story? So all these kinds of and of course ethics tied into this and everything.
What ethics?
Oh, privacy issues, defamation, all kinds of things that come about with that.
Right. But core to this is a really fundamental one. Is it true?
Right.
Does the story need to be told?
Right.
How would you like to see X, Y, Z? And I think there's, if I have a complaint about journalism courses, and I think this is certainly true in the United States, too many of them are vocational in nature and not theoretical and philosophical in nature. What do I mean by that?
Yeah.
Interns, when I get applications for them, they'll tell me that I can operate this, I can run this camera, I can do this, I can edit on Adobe, I can do blah, blah. And I say, I don't give a damn. I can teach you that in 10 minutes.
Right.
I can give you all of that in 20 minutes.
Right.
And you'll learn your creative abilities.
Right.
To do it.
Right.
I want to know how you think. I want to know what when I started as a trainee at the BBC, the first thing we did in the morning was we'd sit in there and you'd be asked about the news of the morning. What did you listen to that morning? What had you heard?
Right.
What was the lead story?
Right.
How had it been covered? What was wrong with that coverage? Would you have led on that? Why wouldn't you? And you really had to come prepared.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that rigor has gone.
Oh yeah. Well, again, back to the kind of news consumption. I ask the students, where do you get your news? Almost none of them. It's all social media. In this country, especially social media. Almost no newspapers. Students don't read the papers. I used to give editing quizzes. Would just cover the front page of 3 newspapers in New York. When I was teaching at Columbia, this wasn't journalism students, but it was strategic communications. 3 newspapers, front page stuff for the week. They would invariably fail the quizzes. Just a glance at the front page.
Okay, but so we have to adapt.
Right.
We have to adapt.
Right.
They're not going to.
No.
So we have to adapt and learn those social medias that are acceptable as venues for real journalism.
Right.
It's no use, I say it again to interns, I say to them, what have you, they come into my office and I'll say, what have you listened to this morning or watched or whatever, recognizing that today they don't read as much.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to one candidate, it's not immediately clear why you want to be a journalist. You haven't read anything. You haven't listened to anything. You haven't watched anything. You've looked at some weird digest of something on the bus here.
Right.
Why do you want to be a journalist?
Right.
It is inconceivable. When I sit down now with my team in New York and we go through the morning meeting on Quest Means Business, and these are great, 20-somethings,
right.
but it is inconceivable that anybody will have come into work without knowing what's on the front page of the New York Times.
Right. Right.
And what did NPR's Morning Edition lead on? Because some people have different preferences.
Right.
They will certainly know the major stories
Right. Right.
of the day.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think I would encourage you, as you do your journalism, I would encourage you to try and put that into it.
Yeah.
So that even if it's uncomfortable for the students,
Right.
he's going to ask, what's the lead story?
Right. Yeah.
He's going to ask, what did the BBC lead on today?
Right.
He's going to want to know. I'll give you an example, if I may.
Yeah.
When I did my BBC News traineeship interview, I remember learning for it. And you had to you knew the odds were 1 in 100 or whatever it is of getting it. And they would start like this. I would watch the evening newses in the week before, all three of them, and there's only three of them in Britain, so I'd watch all three.
Right.
And then I knew, and the questioning would go something like this. So Margaret Thatcher, she was Prime Minister then, is in the United States. Yes. What's she doing today? Well, she's going to see the head of the Federal Reserve. Who is the head of the Federal Reserve? Well, in those days it was Alan Greenspan.
Yeah, right.
Alan Greenspan. Well, what's the policy on X? And the questioner would just keep digging.
Wow.
Eventually they'd hit bedrock and you'd have to say, I don't know. For me, it was Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
The second question on Northern Ireland and I was out.
Right. Right.
But you learned that art.
Well, very much a law school format.
Because it is.
Yeah.
It's forensic.
Yep.
It is forensic. And that's why I'm guessing when you read a newspaper, or when I use that in a looser term, online.
Yeah, right. Whatever, right.
You and I are really only reading the first 3 paragraphs to update us on the instant event.
Right.
We pretty much know the background underneath. So I will read the first part of the article, first 5 paragraphs, what actually happened, who said what, who did what, what's happening next.
Right.
And then I'll go to an opinion piece on it. I don't need to read the background.
Yeah, right.
Unless it's but then I love these days when out of nowhere will come a story.
Right.
That you've got no idea about.
Yeah. Yeah.
None. Who knows? Who knew where that story came from?
Right.
And then you really have to read up on it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the issues with online media, that you kind of lose that chance of serendipity that you would get from the physical paper, right? You're coming across a story, because the way the algorithms work, it starts feeding more of the stories that you are reading and things like that. So you start to see your own, you kind of get your daily me.
So I do question, and I don't know whether this is just an age thing, that my comprehension of reading online is worse than if I've read the article in a newspaper.
No, there's been studies about how well people comprehend and multitask and things, and there's definitely across ages. That's the one reason you see a lot of younger people now having trouble focusing and concentrating, doing longer form things, because they're so used to the quick hit, of everything online.
There was a study, wasn't there? Multitasking doesn't really exist.
Exactly.
The amount of productivity as a result of multitasking is actually very. So I
Yeah.
still will sit down and do a task. If I'm going to write an article, I will sit down at my desk and I will do a task.
Yeah.
I will sit down and do something properly.
Yeah. And I found turning off the social media, not having my email on when I have to focus, especially academic articles where you have to really dive into it. Yeah, it makes all the difference. It's unbelievable.
And at the same time, I'll give you an example. I am absolutely loving the Meta AI that's built into WhatsApp.
Oh.
I'm not sure whether it's available here in
Right. What do you like about it? What do you love about it?
The ability to ask it questions which hopefully with my years of experience, I can make a value judgment on what I need to do with that information. Right. So, for instance, here we go. Let's just find this 1 second. Here we go. You sure you want to do this?
Yeah, see.
And I'm also, I cannot stand voice notes.
Okay.
Because you can't listen back to them.
Right.
And there's no paper trail.
Right.
But I love dictating to text.
Oh, okay.
So, here we go. The American University... give me the correct absolute title so we get it. Of Armenia.
Of Armenia. American University of Armenia.
Is the American University of Armenia regarded as a quality educational institution?
This is what's called dead air.
It hasn't answered. I don't think I've got a strong enough signal in here. I think you're saved. I think you're saved.
I was going to reach for the X-Acto knife to cut the tape. So
no, and I can show people that it couldn't do it. No, it's connecting, and I've lost 5G. I've lost 5G. So I can't.
Right.
But I will use that all the time.
Wow. Okay.
I will use it all the time.
Right.
Because what it also is, it'll give me a great summary.
Right.
And then it'll give me the sources at the bottom, so I can make my own judgment about that.
Right. How do you think AI is going to be affecting business journalism, especially? Because, with journalistic writing, it's fairly formulaic. It's easy for AI to emulate some of that, combine either business or sports. You have, as long as you got a good database, you got the numbers that can plug in. Do you see that threatening some of what you've been doing with business journalism?
For someone like myself, no, but for the industry overall, absolutely. See, I use ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT to write a speech.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
If I'm writing a speech, I will give the salient information to ChatGPT, construct me a speech to do X, Y, Z, which I will then take and put into my own words.
Oh, right. Okay. Right.
Having fact checked it all. But
yeah, of course.
I will, absolutely.
Right.
That's just nothing more than research to get an outline or a template.
Right, exactly.
I could never use it as it's given it to me.
Right, exactly. But that's an issue in education, though, now. So people writing essays, just taking it from ChatGPT. So it's become a real issue around academic honesty.
Right, but here's a point. Why not just embrace that? And by that, I mean, say to the students, all right.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. You can use ChatGPT, but you have to highlight those parts that are from ChatGPT and those parts that are you.
Yeah.
So we can see. And if you end up with 70% ChatGPT, you need to ask yourself, are you any really good at your job?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, you should be a professor because this is exactly what some educators are doing, using ChatGPT to actually have students more critically analyze the material that comes out of that.
Right, because
look at the sources and things.
Look, again, when I was growing up, we weren't allowed calculators in exams.
Right.
Now that's ludicrous now.
Right.
The idea of not having a calculator in an exam just to do the grunt work.
Exactly.
Let ChatGPT do the grunt work. And unless you're studying to be a librarian and you do know how the Dewey system works, and you need to put it into practice, let ChatGPT do the grunt work, and you actually do the clever bit.
Right, exactly. So, shifting gears, I want to ask, as you've long been interested in aviation and airlines, and ironically also don't like heights. So I wonder how that squares. But that's maybe a whole other thing.
Yes.
So, but it might be best for the therapist couch, maybe. But with all the traveling you've done, you must have the world's absolute. What is the worst travel experience or worst flight experience you've ever had?
The worst flight. Well, first of all, do not for 1 second assume I'm going to tell you which airline.
No, I didn't. That's why I didn't ask for that.
But there haven't actually been that many of them. By worst, you're talking about what? Flights cancelled, events missed.
Okay.
I've had a couple of, missed takeoff, missed landings or missed approaches. But by and large, actually one of the most difficult times was the last time I was here in Armenia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. Well, I came here, I was giving a speech, and I got shingles the week before.
Ooh.
Exactly. And I can remember my shirt couldn't even touch my skin. You got two choices. You either cancel or you grin and bear it. And now throwing up on air is not usually good. And I was doing the program from India once, and I was feeling terrible. I mean, really bad. And in the breaks, I had to go behind the bushes, put my finger down the throat, and throw up.
Right.
And of course, they could hear all of this in Atlanta because I had my microphone still on. There was the time that the guest fell off the chair.
Oh, wow.
I said, Baroness Smithers, thank you. And she rolled herself backwards and fell over. And I laughed, which was even worse. There's so many of things that just happen.
Right.
But I still, I cannot emphasize enough, Shawn.
Right.
I still get excited when it's that moment to go on air and you say, good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Tuesday the 14th. The Prime Minister has announced new plans as part of the government strategy.
Right.
And I still get excited by that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it shows in your work too. It's just, it's amazing work. So the body of work you've done, I mean, being, across field with business and travel and everything, it's really amazing stuff. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here, and really enjoyed it. So hopefully
I will be back when
again.
you've opened your journalism, and I shall expect.
We have courses that you'll be happy about that's covering the Caucasus, so more theoretical courses. It's not all hands-on, not all trade school. That's very much built into the design of the course, so the whole program. So, yep. And we'll come back and get your stamp of approval. So.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor to be here.
Thank you.